All right. Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here today with Tim Freke. Tim is a philosopher and author of 35 books translated into more than 15 languages, including a Sunday Times bestseller and Daily Telegraph Book of the Year. He was included in the 100 Most Spiritually Influential Living People list in Watkins Magazine 2021 and 2022. His latest and most important work is Why Your Life Really Matters, the Podbook, which combines the intellectual clarity of a book with the personal connection of a podcast, with chapters published weekly on YouTube full of genuinely groundbreaking ideas. His Podbook will begin releasing from the 1st of May, 2025, in a few days here. Exciting. So, Tim, welcome to the show.
It's a delight to talk to you, Jordan.
Awesome. Same here. So I felt like we just leap straight off the deep end because I think that's what people would love to hear. And so my first question for you is, what is reality? What are your fundamental spiritual or ontological views about what this is that we're currently experiencing?
Well, that is one of my favorite questions. I kind of wake up with that most days, I guess. And I did a series called What is Life, where I would talk to people I was interested in talking to and sit down. And the first thing I'd say is, what is this? And so it's a delight to have you ask me that question because no one ever does. Okay, so let's come at it like this. I think it's a process of becoming. That what I notice is that everything changes all the time, and what happens next is based on what happened before. And I'm aware that the really big scientific idea of the last few hundred years is that the universe isn't a thing, it's a process. And it's an evolutionary process. And it's taken us from the simplest things you can imagine to this. The line I just love, every time I say it, it makes me smile, is, according to our present understanding, 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was pretty much just hydrogen, a gas. And that gas has evolved into you and me. And what I think we're in then is a process of evolutionary becoming or evolutionary emergence in which new things emerge all the time based on what's happened before. And the big idea, which is in Soul Story, my last book, which is behind me, and in this Podbook, which is 8 years of hard labor to take Soul Story to the next level, the fundamental ontological idea that I'm pushing, and I mean pushing in the sense of I'm trying it out, I'm really seeing if it works, and I think it does, is what if everything that has any quality whatsoever is part of this one process of becoming? Because that's what reality is. It is a process of becoming.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, how does God fit into this picture for you? I think you sometimes use that word and yeah, I think you have a unique conception of what God might be. So I'm curious for you to layer that in for us.
Yeah. So I've had a relationship with something greater than myself, which is traditionally called God, and which I call God. I don't have a problem with the word. I know lots of people who do, so I'm careful with it, but let's use the word God. Since I was very young, since I first had my first spiritual experience, which was very powerful for me when I was 12 years old, and the ideas I had to understand it with were ideas I'd got from church, and this was an experience of this overwhelming love, and I'd heard that God is love, so it was like, this is God, fantastic. Oh my goodness, had a massive impression on me and set me off on this whole journey, which has been my life, trying to work out what the hell is that and how do I get back to it? How do I share that with other people? And all the books I've written about are really about that in some way. And I live in service of that as I'm best able. But here's the problem I've got with it, Jordan, which is the traditional view is that God is outside. So when I said it straight away, look, what if everything is part of the process of becoming that has any qualities? That would include God, because God has qualities. When I experience it, God isn't nothing. God is love or wisdom or something, which is beauty. It has qualities. So what I've started to wonder is whether God isn't something outside which creates or dreams the universe or any of those mythological ideas, which I've had myself in the past. I started to wonder, what if this process of emergence, which has gone from what it looks like, it starts with something we can only understand with mathematics, which is informational, that becomes what we can understand with physics, that becomes what we can understand with biology, and then that leads to the psyche. Psyche's Greek for soul. It leads to soul. And the soul is what we're experiencing right now as an imaginal, non-material domain in which there's meaning and images and dreams and all sorts. What if what we experience as God is a more emergent level still? So that God isn't the source, it's actually the universe is flowering into God. So that's what I've been exploring. And why that's so attractive to me is because it helps me cope with two fundamental problems with the idea of God as at the beginning. One of which is the traditional idea of the problem of evil. Like if there's this great loving God, why is existence so full of suffering and seemingly meaningless suffering, like the horrendous diseases that young children have, and just like we don't, why would you do that? If it's someone running the show. And then the other problem you have is from science, that it's what I call the problem of absurdity, which is this God who seems to be a super intelligence to me in my experience, as best as I can make it out, as apparently doesn't know what it's doing, because we've had 5, I think it is, complete extinctions on the biological level before we reached us. So this God doesn't know what they're doing. It's kind of a mean, mad God. But if I go, no, hang on, if everything is part of this process of becoming, where it starts isn't with God, it starts with the simplest thing you can possibly imagine, which the word I would use is it's one, the one. And I don't mean a one something. I just mean one. Undifferentiatedness. Not a one mind or a one God or one conscience, just one. And that one differentiates into the informational level we understand with maths. That becomes all the other levels, biology, psyche or soul, and that leads to God. So God isn't responsible for the suffering of the universe. God has emerged from it like us and is responding to it like us, but more so. So when I touch that great compassion, I become more compassionate. I become more benevolent. It brings out the best in me because it is a response to the way the universe has arisen through this process of becoming, which didn't know where it was going. It was actually a creative process. And I think it still is. It's genuinely creative, which means it's working out where it's going. And that's why each one of us feels like we're working out where we're going.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I love the sheer originality of your perspective, and I'm looking forward to mapping the terrain of a few more of your ideas, because you have so many very unique and original ideas and insights. I do want to ask a question that pushes back a little bit or offers a counter perspective, which to the problem of evil that you raised,
Yep.
which is, historically a great problem of philosophy. What would you say to somebody who said, the cosmos shines forth from the heart of God as a spontaneous mythopoetic song that is all the more rich due to the dynamic contrast and the kind of cosmic cycles of contraction and expansion, and inevitably the winters of suffering give rise to the spring of joy and expansion, and these cycles, there's a profound poetry and symmetry within these cycles?
I'd say it is exactly what you described, a mythopoetic vision. And I think, I mean, my instinctive human response, if you like, is, yeah. I remember reading an article about it. It's kind of an amoeba that got into the ear of a little boy when he was swimming and ate his brain from the inside. There's nothing mythopoetic about that. That's just ugly. And so there's that response from me. But then on a more philosophical level, I'd say, look, I think there's two mistakes in ontology, one of which is made by religion or spirituality, and one of which is made by science. And they're the same mistake in the opposite direction. So and they're both what you could call anachronistic. They're using the wrong ideas for the wrong level. So what science does, and love it as I do, the philosophy that's associated with it is very often reductionistic. So it takes the level of ideas or language that's appropriate for the lower levels, the foundational levels, maths and physics, and applies them to the higher levels. So that's where you get Francis Crick saying, look, your loves, your dreams, your hopes, everything about you is really just neurons, and neurons are just chemicals, and chemicals is just physics. So it makes a mistake because it needs a different language to understand the human level. Because the more emergent is, to me, more than. It can't be reduced. That's the whole point. It is more than. This moment is more than the past. Everything is becoming more than. It's becoming. Excuse me. So you see that. So by using the wrong language on the wrong level, you get this misanthropic, horrible reductionist idea. And then spirituality does the same thing, but the opposite way around. It takes ideas and language which are great for the human level: conscious, feeling, love, wisdom, intelligence. And then it takes them down to the primal levels where it doesn't exist. There's not going to be any of those things for billions of years. What you've got on the primitive levels is the one as two, for instance. Now, that's also a spiritual idea. Of course, you find it in Taoism, you find it in Kabbalah, you find it in Gnosticism. It is also a familiar idea. But what I think we need to do is just strip away all of the mythopoetic elements from it, because they are appropriate for a much later, more emergent level of reality. And when we do that, we can keep all of the beauty of the mythopoetic version without the thing that doesn't really work anymore. Because we need a spirituality, in my view, which is post-scientific. And all of that really is still going back to a pre-scientific mindset. And we've just moved further now. But the essence of the spiritual insight can be captured still, but just in a new way.
Thank you. That's a really rich response, and I'll sit with that, and maybe we'll return to that later.
Sure.
I'd love to map the territory of a few more of your ideas here. So you've coined the terms unidual and unividual. I'm curious, what do these terms mean for you? How do they fit into this picture?
Okay, so the unidual thing came really in response to the non-dual. So I've been around the beginnings of 30 years ago, no one had heard of non-duality. And then I just watched it just become this phenomena. And I was part of that because I was getting invited to speak at all these conferences, and my ideas have evolved. So whilst I was never a kind of anti-self non-dualist, I was lumped in with that rise of that philosophy and had been influenced by it myself. And I do think we can talk about something which is non-dual. When I say, look, it's one and undifferentiated, well, it's non-dual. It's not two because it's undifferentiated. So I do think that is the foundation, but the undifferentiated is also differentiated. So it's in relationship with itself, which is what duality is. And then the reality which has emerged from it in this process of becoming is relational. This is what we found in physics. It's the key to understanding, I think, quantum physics, and then up into everything, really. Space is relational. Time is relational. I'm relational. I've never existed on my own ever. I always exist in relationship with the universe, so do you. And that relationality, which comes with two-ness, which is how you'd measure it mathematically, has blossomed into everything. So it seems to me a better description is not just non-dual, is to say it's unidual. It's one and two at the same time. That's the key. And many, of course, now as well. And then the idea of the univigil was to give a name for where I think we're heading. Because it really fascinates me how human beings have evolved. And our evolution, really, if you think, what's the difference between you and me and our cave-dwelling ancestors? Biologically, we're not that different. We are different, but not that different. The big difference is our ideas. Our ideas mean that, they were struggling around trying to make stone axes and we're on the internet because we've built on the process of becoming. And through that, the nature of a human being has changed. And I think the big change happened around the time we think of as the scientific revolution, which is when human beings before that tended to be collectivist. They existed within a tribe, within a group in which most people had the same ideas. And in fact, if people came along with new ideas, they were often exiled, killed. We didn't like it. And then over the last period, and just in passing, I think it's that what happened for the scientific revolution was we saw the beginning of what you could call the individual, the modern individual, which is someone who doesn't think like everyone else, can question the assumptions of the group. And it's that questioning and thinking new thoughts, that's the level of becoming on a new level now in the psyche. So now we've got a whole new level of becoming opens up in which more and more individuals are reflecting, seeing their own ideas, which is not an easy thing to do, and evolving them consciously, individually and together. And that's going to give science, but not just science. It's also going to give us the explosion of the arts, the idea of the artistic genius. It's going to give us the entrepreneur. It's going to give us the massive development of wealth, medicine. It's all coming from individuals who can now reflect deeper. And what I'm interested in is what comes next. And my suggestion is that the individual is now evolving into the univigil, where the univigil is an individual. In fact, they're able to reflect even deeper. But they're becoming conscious of, everything actually is all one. It is that is a reality. It is one process of becoming, and there's one essence or beingness that has become everything. And when we recognize that, we come into these mystical states of awakening, and they are very profound. And I think actually that's what connects us then to God, or this higher level of emergence, which is experienced as this most enormous love.
I love that. Thank you. And I love our connection around love. Love is such so core to everything for me. I wanted to ask how you feel about the term transduel. I've started using that term a bit recently to kind of indicate that reality transcends and includes duality. So it's unidual in the sense that, as you say, it's one being, and yet it's also multiplicity. It's also relationality, and it's just utterly inclusive, and yet also always beyond. So the trans kind of points to this quality of it's always beyond any way we conceive it to be, any way we hold it to be. It will always escape whatever that structure is, and yet it's fully inclusive of every experience, every being, every mode, every relationship. Very similar to your unidual idea, perhaps, but curious how that lands.
Yeah, no, I think it's a slightly different idea, and I like it. I think the process of becoming is always opening up something which transcends everything that's been before. And when you touch something greater, like what we've been calling God, it is so much more that, it's humbling. But you don't need to do that even. I think I've written a book called The Mystery Experience years ago, and for a long time I used to be introduced at conferences. People would just jokingly call me Mr. Mystery because I'd just always come in with, what the hell is this? It's such a mystery. And that's fundamental to my being. I start with that. I start with, wow. And then we do our best to understand it. But you never lose that. In fact, in some ways, it just becomes more and more mysterious because as your understanding enlarges, so does the awe and the mystery that we're in. So I really relate to that a lot. I love that.
Beautiful. Yeah. I've come to feel like the mystery is baked in a profound sense. Peter Brown, I think, coined the term unresolvability, and he would say reality is unresolvable in that any way we ever resolve it to be, and we increasingly discover more and more profound ways that we can hold it to be and kind of lenses we can see it through. And yet it always, like water through our hands, escapes these lenses and can't fully be contained by any one of these lenses. And so you could also say transresolvable. It's like it transcends and includes every way that we might hold it to be, and the mystery is baked in. I'm curious how you feel about that idea.
I would, my response to that would be that very concept, not the one that you're saying, but the idea that we could contain it, arises from a misplaced epistemology. It just feels like, well, it doesn't even arise. What do you think we're doing here? You think an idea contains something, or a theory contains reality, or like, I don't think that's what we're doing at all. I think the etymology of the word truth fascinates me. And when I traced it back, it came back to trustworthy. Like, we still have that when we talk about a true friend or a false friend. It's like, is it trustworthy? Once you get that, it really opened up epistemology for me, because it felt like, look, from a very basic biological level, every life form needs to get a trustworthy picture or a trustworthy relationship with its environment, because otherwise it can't live. That'll keep it alive. It'll stop it being eaten. It'll allow it to eat. It'll allow it to mate. And when it's untrustworthy, it fails. And of course, a lot of nature is designed to fool you. The bird, the butterfly with a wing on with an eye on its wing, so that a bird thinks it's a danger and doesn't eat it. All of that sort of camouflage. But what it's looking for is what's trustworthy. And then we've come along and we've moved on to the idea. We've gone from the instinctual kind of algorithms, which allow us to go, is it that, is it this, how should I, to ideational, complex ideational categories. And we're doing the same thing. We're just going, how's the best damn way that I can categorize this and put it into a narrative which allows me to live? And not just on the biological level, but for us now on the level of meaning and the spiritual level, so that we're doing the same thing. So there's no containing of anything. It's just, well, this is the best we've got. And then we work with each other, ideally, to improve it and to keep it emerging.
Would you agree, though, that it's a very common human tendency to mistake the map for the territory, and that dogmatically clinging to particular maps has led many groups to demonize and attack other groups? And so it may be useful to point out that the map is not the territory.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, the map. The line I've put in a few books is the menu is not the meal. That's why if you eat the menu, it tastes of cardboard. It's like you want the real thing, and that mistake of thinking that somehow, and you get it a lot in spirituality. It's like when people go, oh, it's beyond words, and it's like, well, everything's beyond words. So the story which I always think of is an old story. I came across it when I was a teenager, I think, which is the story is an Indian story about the emperor and the sage, and the emperor says, how would you explain the mystical experience? And the sage says, have you ever tasted a mango? And the king says, yes. And he says, how would you explain that taste to someone who'd never tasted anything sweet? And what people often draw from that, what I drew from that when I was young was, oh, the mystical experience is beyond words. But what it's actually saying is all experience is beyond words. Because the experience of sweet is beyond words if you've never experienced it. So when I say to you, the mystical experience, or it's all one, or there's the big love, I can see that you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that will be because you've experienced it. If you haven't experienced it, you have every right to sit there thinking, are you making this shit up? Does that have any reality to it? So the words are only ever a way of telling you about something which I've categorized about the nature of reality and gone, oh, I've had an experience which I've categorized as love and very big and transcendent and all of that. And if you can relate to it, but nothing's contained in it, and it's not true of just spiritual experience. One of the big things for me, I'm kind of digressing, but it's an interesting point, so hopefully you'll enjoy it, which is I used to live in a world where there was science and common sense understanding of life, and then there was spiritual understanding, different. And you experienced it in a different way, and it was beyond words, and it was supernatural, above the natural. And now I don't live in that world. Now I live in a world where everything is the one thing evolving. So, like I said, the epistemology that I use in spirituality is the same one in biology, just on a much more emergent level. So that there's one process of emergence which has led to God and led to understanding things in this more emergent way. But it's essentially the same thing. Differentiate, discern the differentiation. Everything is one thing differentiated, and living organisms are doing their best to discern that. And we're doing it on a very high level, and we can learn to discern God. And if you haven't learned to do that, it'll sound like nonsense. But if you stumble into it, or someone teaches you, or you hear an idea and you try it out, and then you experience it, then I think you end up going, oh, this is real. This is most definitely real.
Very real. And would you say, in the light of the mystical experience, for me, it seemed like it's revealed that all experience is fundamentally mystical. And what had previously seemed mundane, like us talking right now seems to me, if I just tune into it in a certain way, it's like, oh, this is completely astonishing. It's completely baffling that this is here at all. And color itself and shape is like, what even is that? It's an utterly astonishing, mystical mystery. All of it is kind of how it shows up for me. I'm curious how that strikes you.
Yeah, because if you step into a more emergent state, you therefore see with more emergent eyes, is the way I would, a bit clumsy, but you know what I'm trying to say. So one of the things you get is beauty, and a bigger sense of the mystery as well. But beauty increases. And that's interesting to me. And so your appreciation of it, and you see it fresh, don't you? Because when you've been in something, you've been in the biological level all your life, and for me, that's a long time. So it's very easy to think it's run out of interest. But then when you come up into this other state, it's like, oh, this is of infinite interest. It's so amazing that it exists at all.
Yeah, it's a cool way to look at it. And maybe there is a way in which it kind of redeems all the prior stages that, from a certain view may have seemed meaningless. They're kind of redeemed in the light of that beauty that is now seen suffusing everything.
I want to do what you did earlier when you flashed a little heart in the corner. I can't work out how to do that. Yes, I love that word. I love that word, John. That's exactly it for me. It redeems it. And that's what I see God as. God is a level that redeems the suffering. Because it's like anything. If eventually it leads to something really good, like all the terrible things that have happened in my life, if they've led to somewhere good, eventually they're okay because they're redeemed. And that's what that love does. You touch that love and you go, this can redeem everything. And I think that's exactly it. It's like whatever else it is, it led to this. And this is worth it. This is so beautiful, so sublime. Redeemed. Yeah, beautiful. It's exactly the right.
Wonderful. Yeah. Redemptive love. Redemptive love is one of my favorite phrases. And mapping more of the territory of your wonderful ideas, you have a very interesting conception of the soul, which you've touched on a bit, and an idea of how reincarnation might be possible within a scientific emergent framework. I'm curious if you could expound on that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big subject, but I'll do my best. First of all, to me, again, with the etymology as my root of going, okay, so these words, psyche, mind, soul, if you trace them back, they all seem to be words from different languages, different linguistic roots that are referring to the obvious, which is in every moment you're experiencing the biological sensations, the world, and you're experiencing something other than that, which is not in space. It has no physical existence. It's transmaterial, transphysical. And that's the mind or the psyche or the soul. And that's what we need to explore. So for me, I mean, once you've got these words, people use them in all sorts of ways. What I mean is just that. I mean, a level of reality has arisen, which is made of images of our sensory experience. But it's its own domain. And what I've been exploring is we can understand spirituality as the exploration of that non-material realm, which is itself evolving, as well as our understanding of it. And the mistake that's being made at the moment, first of all, that it's reduced to the biological, it's just a byproduct. It's not just a byproduct. It is a more emergent level of the whole process of evolution that got us from gas to this. It's another level. And just as biology arises as a ecosystem, I think the psyche also, the soul, arises as an ecosystem. And that ecosystem, which is an ecology of soul, which is a lovely line I stole from Terence McKenna when I did some work with him before he died. The ecology of soul, that's what it is. And that's what the spiritual traditions call the Duat or the Bardos or the spirit realm or all those different names. And it's a level of reality, and we're in it right now. We're experiencing the edges of it in our imaginal experience. But if you do esoteric practices, you take ayahuasca, if you do any of these things, you can step into it and go, oh, there's more going on here. I'm actually connected to a whole lot of other souls in a whole fabric of interactions. And so I won't back this up right now, but I'll just lay it out because it'll distract me too much probably. But what I'm suggesting with the ancient idea that the soul is immortal is that that's true. That's certainly been my experience around death and what I get from the studies of death. I've written books on death. I've worked with dying. It's an area I've really dove into. But rather than understanding it as the soul comes from outside, which is the tradition that we've fallen. So there's something outside the world, and we've fallen into the world. And Plato says the body is a tomb. We've fallen into this captivity, and the job is to free ourselves from our humanity and get back to God and disappear off into God as like a drop into the ocean. I think that's a perfectly understandable view that arose, 2,500 years ago. But now we can turn it around and much more optimistically go, oh, no, we haven't fallen from anywhere. This whole thing is arising. It's evolving so that the immortal soul has evolved. And all I'm suggesting is, in essence, is we're now functioning on as a psychobiological system. We're on these two levels. And that we've evolved to the point where when the biological element of the system can't work anymore, the level that's working on the psyche can. and that the experience we're having now of the psyche continues. It just goes much, much deeper. And it goes deeper in the same way that if you withdraw from your body in meditation or in sleep, that world becomes far, far more vivid because you're paying it attention. So when the biological system fails, the psyche, which you're already in, is increased. And as a simple analogy, and again, I'd have to go into some more ontology to back this up properly, which I will do if you want, but just to keep, I haven't actually got to your question, I'm aware, which is about reincarnation. But as a simple analogy, it's like we're on Zoom right now, and we're functioning on two levels on Zoom. So there's what you see and there's what you hear, and they happen together. There are. But if right now you suddenly, I was here and then you would just look at it and go, oh, looks like the audio part of Tim's Zoom process isn't working. There's been a problem. There's been a glitch in the program or something. You wouldn't go, oh, that's impossible. How can one bit function without the other? And in the same way, I think we're looking at something like that. It's just there's the equivalent of a program running us, which is our nature, our past. That's what we are. And there's algorithms within that process, which is keeping us functioning biologically. And then there's other algorithms which are keeping us functioning on the level of psyche or soul. And that it's perfectly possible that when the biological system fails because it's very complex and things go wrong eventually, this carries on. And once you've got that, then you can go, okay, so we're now entering that ecology of soul. We experience what I think of as soulscapes, which is what the near-death experience is about. And you're experiencing something which is itself evolved. You know, I think when people died in the past, they don't experience the same thing because the level of the imaginal, it hadn't arose in that way. So you get much more idiosyncratic, the Valhalla and all the land of shades early on, hardly formed, just kind of shadows. Before you get these modern NDEs, which are just so rich and vivid and multicultural and like us. And then that opens up the possibility of understanding reincarnation as going, okay, so now you've got a system, an informational system, essentially, because we go back down far enough, the universe is information. So you've got an emergent information system functioning on the level of psyche, and you've got biological systems, and you get a new biological system coming into existence. And it's possible to enter a state what's called psychosymbiosis, where a psyche and an arising body come into a symbiotic relationship. And it's a bit of a crass analogy, but it helps. It's similar to like here's all this information on this level, and you can download it like on a computer to another piece of less emergent information. And they become united again, and the journey continues. But what is continuing is you. And so there's so many things which interact here, because the key with understanding all of that is to understand identity. Let me just stop there for a moment. But I think the key to understanding all of this is identity.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just put that in my own words to see if I'm grokking it, it's kind of like from biology, a new emergent substrate came forth, an informational substrate that is able to hold information and hold kind of karmic imprints of our unique individuated flowering and all of our kind of imaginal dreamings. And this new substrate somehow developed its own kind of existence independent of biology, and then karmic individuated entities or individuated flowerings within this substrate are actually able to symbiotically live multiple ongoing lifetimes by kind of partnering with emergent entities in the physical biological substrate. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, I think so, Jordan. I think this is not to disagree with anything you just said, but I would want to say, look, it's all informational because it starts with information. So this is a new level of information. And for people watching this that may think, that doesn't sound very likely, does it? I think the key thing is to go, what is the level? What is the I need to talk about identity. Let me just do that. You asked early on about what I saw ontologically. What is this? And I said it's a process of becoming. It's an emergence. Well, how does that happen? And here's my suggestion, which is that everything that has formed in this process of forming sets up patterns that repeat. And that what's happening right now is mostly governed by those patterns that repeat. But because all the different systems are coming into new relationships in every new moment, they're always in a slightly different way. And the more emergent levels is where you see the most creativity. So nothing much has happened in your room or my room. It's pretty much stayed the same. But you and me, we've been moving about and saying new words and thinking new thoughts. And it's a whole, yeah. But you can see this one process. So I call that passivity. And the essential idea is that the past is setting up. The past hasn't gone anywhere. The past accumulates. A bit like in science, the universe is expanding spatially. Well, it's also expanding temporally. And the past is forming what you could call, if you're careful, it's only an analogy, like a hard disk of the universe, which is the algorithms that govern everything. So the laws of nature on the lowest level are evolving, because everything is, but also how I function as distinct from you, my accent in this way because of my own past. And what that says about identity, for me, for you, for everything, is that you are your past. So you don't have a life, you are a life. You are the relationship of one evolving, emerging system and the universe. You're the one as this one. And you are defined by everything that you've ever done, thought, everything that's made up who you are. And once you've got such a really, really simple and clear sense of identity, then you can go, well, what survives death? Well, you do. The one process of evolving, system evolving, carries on. It's not some bit of you. It's not some, separate bit. It's like, the body won't function anymore, but everything you ever experienced with the body is still who you are. You are everything you've been. You're your past. And then the same with reincarnation. It's like, well, you may not remember it, like I don't remember most of my past now, but that's what I am. And it looks like when you die, from the many reports we have, hundreds of thousands of them, that you get to see your life because that's who you are. That's called the life review in the near-death experience. So you actually come into a more emergent state and you see everything you've done, who you are. And it looks like as you come back into a relationship with the less emergent levels of biology again, you can't access that anymore. So you start fresh, but you're not fresh. And as you begin to evolve, like happened to me when you start feeling like there's something else deep inside me. I already know some of this stuff. I remember studying Kabbalah when I was very young and being told by the guy who was teaching me, he said, you know this stuff. It's like, and I had that a lot. It was like, I know there's something there because I can't access it directly, powerfully, but it's there because that's who I am. I'm this before, I'm this before, I'm this before. I'm not trapped by that because I'm creating myself now because our conversation is now part of who I am forever. So we're inside each other forever now. And we move on from that. And every time we do that, we change our passivity and that's how we evolve and we become more than.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you for laying that out for us. I want to shift gears and um, ask about something that relates to a conversation you had with Daniel Schmachtenberger, actually, where you discussed what I feel is one of your most important insights for me that Daniel seemed to share. Something along the lines of any perspective or set of assumptions that are deeply internalized will tend to become experiential. So, in the case of like the shadows of modern non duality, they often kind of assume that they're experiencing the naked ontological facts of existence without kind of checking their priors. They don't realize that they have hidden ontological assumptions that cause them to create an epistemology based on direct experience that then seems to prove their prior ontological assumptions. And you guys pointed out that science does the same thing in a way. Science has certain assumptions, creates an epistemology based on material observation that then seems to prove its ontology. And so what I wonder is, how does your current view escape this seemingly unavoidable trap of, well, not necessarily a trap, but just a way that existence functions, is that you're also presenting a perspective which you've clearly deeply internalized. And to me, I would say that perspective is also unavoidably mythopoetic, because it seems like humans just are mythopoetic beings. And so you've deeply internalized a mythopoetic perspective, and you've begun to experience existence in accordance with that lens. And that seems to be unavoidably happening for all human beings. And so I'm wondering, what would you say to somebody who said, you know, what you're presenting is another valid mythopoetic lens among basically infinite valid mythopoetic lenses, and reality is almost like this astonishing shape-shifting chameleon that whichever mythopoetic lens you deeply internalize, it conforms to that, it adapts to that, and you will literally begin to experience reality in that way. Yet reality is always transcendent of, yet fully inclusive of, any of these modes or any of these deeply internalized lenses.
So I think relativism is a mistake. And I don't think it's difficult to see that. I don't think all views are equal. I think we're looking for the most trustworthy, and we find that out when something is untrustworthy. So, all the things that I've been caught in, I was in a cult when I was young and for a short while, and I experienced it. My guru was God. I knew that. I was experiencing it. You don't understand, Jordan. If you experienced it like I, you'd know it too. I said it earlier. If you experience that higher level, you go, this is real. So, okay, so this applies to everything. However, some views are better than others. That's how things progress. The mythopoetic view of Christianity did not give us the internet, and led to all sorts of conflict as well. But it had some good things in. For instance, my view is, you're right. It is, well, it's not mythopoetic, actually. It has a poetic quality to it, I would say, on the level that I don't think it's mythic, but it has a poetry to it because we exist in a world of poetry. That's a reality. That's the level of the psyche where we can relate on these very meaningful ways of understanding. But for me, that is about understanding the right level with the right ideas and not getting confused. So if you want to understand God, maths is not the way. But if you want to understand quantum physics, maths is your best bet. That sort of thing. So that's on the mythopoetic. I don't think it's relative. It's not like, well, they're all just different views. The key thing is to understand what's happening. And that, for me, is the big epistemological breakthrough. And I think a lot of that's happened actually since I spoke to Daniel, but it was obviously going on then, which is this, look, here's the simple way. Everything you're experiencing as this, not that, you are categorizing. Everything. Whether you're doing it on an instinctual biological level that enables you not to fall over when you walk, or whether you're doing that on a ideational level. If I can go, I experience God, then that's different to I experienced boredom. So there is some way that I'm categorizing that. And so what I see is happening on every level from the biological upwards is that we're categorizing our sensory experience and putting it into narratives because it's a process. So we need to get, what is it and what's it doing is what's happening on every level. And so what you experience will depend on the categories you've got. So if the categories you've got are very, very limited, like for our ancestors, it is perfectly reasonable if you've got a handful of ideas to go, the earth is like a mother and the sky is like a father, because that's the ideas you've got. Or there's that thunder sounds a bit like a guy with an anvil. Must be a very big guy with a very big anvil, and he doesn't sound very happy. And if you think like that, it'd be terrifying when the thunder comes, because Thor's angry. Understanding it as a side effect of electromagnetism is better. It's not the same. It's better for all sorts of reasons. And that movement towards better and better and better ways of categorizing but enables you to evolve. But they're still categorizing. And that's the key. So what you can't do is just appeal to experience. You need to be more sophisticated than that. So when people go, look, I experience no self, or I experience the non-duality, it's like, yes, great, now let's dig into it. Because someone else over here, they experience that Jesus is Lord, and you don't think that's right. And someone over here thinks, my guru's God, and I don't think that's right. All these different things. Or in science, there was a wonderful moment with Richard Dawkins, who I admire immensely, fantastic scientist, brilliant man. But someone made the mistake of asking him, do you think there could be life after death? And this look of like, oh, on his face. And he just went, look, it's impossible. It's just impossible. And what Richard can't see is that it's impossible given the way he's categorizing existence. Then it is impossible. But maybe there's a different way of categorizing existence, which was what I'm suggesting, where it isn't impossible. And that's like it with everything. Oh, balloons. So that the spirituality needs to grow up and be a bit more sophisticated in its reflection, so that it doesn't just go, well, I'm experiencing it, therefore it must be true. We have to be able to go, even then you need to reflect. And when you do, you can find that's what's happened to me. I experienced it as everything was in consciousness. And then I started thinking, is that right? For various reasons, which led me to reflect on my experience and eventually go, is there another way to understand this? And there was, and it was better. And then what happened was my experience shifted. Something of it was the same, something of it was better.
Thanks for laying that out. It seems like we have a lot of common ground here. One thing that comes up is that I would say it proved to be better for you, for sure. You can say for sure it's better for you. You're not able to prove that it's definitely the optimal, map for every being, right? Every being is going to.
But we've already been there, Jordan. There is no optimal map. The optimal map would be the territory.
Sure.
Because it's so infinitely granular.
You're saying ideas emerge that are better, and I guess the question arises: better for who? Better for who? And isn't it the case that every individual will have the kind of karmically appropriate or karmically fitted map for every individual will be different depending on their unique makeup?
Everyone will have everyone does have a different ideational network, for sure. And one of the great problems we've got is how we manage to live with that, because we're literally, it'd be like walking around where half the people could see blue and no other color, and the other group could see yellow but no other color, and another one could see red, and trying to live in the world with each other. But it's like that on the ideational level, and that's a real challenge. But that's not the same as going, look, any statement of better is according to a criteria. But it doesn't mean just better is just like, well, it's personal, it's just you. That may be true with some things, like, I like this piece of music. Well, that's an I statement. But if you're saying something about the reality we're shared in, unless you want to go down a solipsistic route, then the fact that we're in the same reality and we can share with each other means that we can engage in a collective endeavor to understand what it is by sharing our categories, by sharing our ideas and working out between us what is better. Well, what will be better depends on the thing you're trying to achieve. So if you want to understand the nature of physics, Einstein is better than Newton because it's gone beyond it. And it's given us the ability to understand how it functions in a better way. And I think exactly the same is true in spirituality. That we can, to me, it is better, not just for me, but better in respect of understanding the nature of God if we see God as emergent. Now, I may be wrong. I'm not saying we've arrived. It's, the optimal anything. I mean, I think that just doesn't make any sense. Of course, it's a process of becoming. There will be something more. But right now, given the ideas we've got, if we rearrange them in this new way, it's better. Now, someone else, of course, can turn around and go, well, I don't think that. And it's like, well, they don't think that. That's fine. But by engaging with it, every progress we've made is by some troublemaker, in this case me, going, I'm not so sure about that idea. What about this one? And then most of those are wrong, or most of those don't help. They die out. They're gone. But some of them move us on. And what I want to do is move us on dramatically, because my aim is to create a spirituality which is so integrated into the one understanding of the becoming that it can come right back into the mainstream of our understanding. The view represented by Richard Dawkins, it stops, and we enter a world in which we're trying to understand all the levels of emergence right up until the spiritual into God as one process in which we are seeking to work together to answer the question you started this whole conversation with. What is reality and what should we do with it?
Yeah, thank you. So I love your notion of truth as trustworthiness, like what can be trusted in an adaptive sense, which interestingly reminds me of this debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris a few years ago, where Peterson put forth a very kind of Darwinian adaptive trustworthiness notion of truth, and Harris was saying, no, not at all. Truth is objective reality. And Peterson was saying, no, the map will never be objective reality. We just need to ask which maps should we actually pass on to our children to allow them to adapt and be able to trust the map and survive and flourish within this, whatever this is. And that kind of brings me to what I would say what I'm expressing is not relativism. I would say any way you experience this, all perspectives, you could say, are ontologically equal in the sense that they are all this. They are all beingness. They're made of being. They share being. As you say, you mentioned the
I'm
being.
just sorry, you need to say that again, Jordan. I don't understand that. All views are ontologically equal.
Yeah, all experience, all views are ontologically equal in that they are this oneness, this unidual, isness, whatever you want to call it. They are reality. They are existence. They exist. They share the fact that they exist, right?
The view does.
Well, the view and the experience can't be pulled apart. So if you have
No, sorry. So I'm not trying to disagree with you. I just haven't quite got what you're saying. So
Okay.
you're not saying the views are ontologically the same. You're going the experiences. I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm saying let's go with experience, because I think view and experience can't be pulled apart. Any experience
Sure.
always has some kind of view layered into it. So I'm saying
Yeah,
that all
definitely.
experiences of reality are ontologically equal in that they exist. They share an equality of the fact that they exist. They are existence itself. But I would say, do you follow me on that? Or do you want to?
Kind of. I don't think of experiences as I tend to think of experience as of something which ontologically exists. And a bit like when you said earlier about with Jordan, I definitely, from what you described, I would come down with Jordan, but also I would maybe go with Sam on the maps are of something. We're trying to get a trustworthy picture of our relationship with all these other systems, which are all also evolving. And it's not arbitrary. It's not like, well, any map will do. It's like, well, no, if you've got the wrong map, then you'll end up heading off to sugar fountain mountain, chocolate mountain, and it won't be there when you get there because it doesn't exist. There's like maps matter. So, all right, but coming back to what you're saying, you're
Yeah.
saying you want to draw an equality between the experience. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm trying to say that all experiences are valid in the sense that they exist. They're a real experience that a being is having, and I don't want to negate anyone's experience. I feel that all experience has an ontological equality in that
So,
it is
so
real,
when
it
the
exists, it's an experience.
so when the bird thinks, "Ooh, great, I can eat that butterfly," and it comes down on the butterfly and it sees its wing and it goes, "Oh, it's a big eye, get out of here." That is not equal to it realizing, "Don't worry, it's just a design. I can eat that," because what it's done is just lost its meal. Surely, on every level, we're looking for what is the most sophisticated or the most trustworthy, truth revealing
Mm.
way of experiencing. Now, they're all experiences, but the idea, and I'm sympathetic to pluralism, to going, look, before you come down anywhere, have lots of views. But you don't. But pluralism is an important part of the process that leads to this is the best one we've got. Now, you at certain points, you may not have arrived there. It might be like, well, I don't know. There's a huge amount of that, I think, and wish we'd do more of that. Just go, I don't know. I can see it both ways. But that's not where you want to stop, because when you come to actually live, I see it both ways won't work. Do you think the maps, we should go left or should go right? Well, you've got to go one or the other. So we're forced into making a decision with things that actually count. So I say pluralism, great, but where we're trying to get to is the best
Yes.
discerning that we can, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely agree with you. I'm deeply, deeply interested and concerned with the question of what maps and mythologies do we want to pass on to our children? What maps of reality do I want to give to my daughter to equip her to navigate this? So we're completely in agreement there. I'm primarily just trying to say that the experience of a bird and the experience of Ramana Maharshi, realizing whatever he realized, there's a certain equality there of the fact that they both exist. They both are experiences that are possible in reality. And for me, there's something important about that. There's a certain
Okay.
what I would call ontological equality, but then I would differentiate that from karmic equality, what I would call karmic equality, which is that some perspectives are karmically more auspicious than others, whereas other perspectives are more karmically inauspicious. Karmically inauspicious perspectives and approaches to life tend toward destruction, corrosiveness, decimation. Karmically auspicious perspectives tend toward flourishing and tend toward harmony and tend toward love. And to me, it seems like that principle we keep returning to of love might be for me, the best articulation in the English language of the kind of divine principle that is encoded in reality, in the sense that there seems to be a kind of karmic metastructure of reality that bends toward love. And when beings align with love, they basically start to have the most beautiful experience that they are able to have in reality. And any route that ignores love or negates love, it ends up going in the direction of great suffering, inward corrosiveness, violence, harm towards self and others. So there seems to be this kind of love at what I would call the heart of reality. You're placing it more as like an omega point, or like a teleos kind of in the future. I guess for me, it feels more like it's the alpha and the omega and the center and beyond all those. But yeah, I'm curious how that lands for you, this idea that all perspectives and experiences share a certain equality in the fact that they exist, but they're not equal in terms of their usefulness or their auspiciousness, basically.
Okay, there's a whole lot in there, Jordan, which is interesting. So let's start with that. I might need you to remind me of some things. So what you're calling karmic, I think, is very close to what I'm calling passivity. The reason I don't call it karmic is because I think it's existing on the lowest levels as well. I think it's there right from the beginning. And it's evolved onto these more emergent levels where we could call it karmic, perhaps, which is that basically you're governed by your past. And that will create your relationship with the universe. And you need to, and that some of that is serving you, is auspicious, and some of it is not. And that's true of every system. Which is why we're looking for the most trustworthy, and trustworthy is just the beginning, because it's trustworthy to go where, and then what you're doing with love is you're going, well, where are we trying to get? Now, a big shift for me was going, look, the universe isn't trying to get anywhere. There's no telos. I don't think there's a telos. I don't think there's an end point we're all heading towards. Where would that come from? I think the universe is a creative process of becoming. It doesn't know where it's going. It never has. But now it's arisen as psyche and soul and a super soul, let's call it, God. So now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm heading towards that. And that is experienced as love. Well, love is an emotion. An emotion is a response to how we read the universe. So if I read it and it's scary, I'll feel fear, which prepares me for action. Love is the same. When it's safe and when I feel love. Well, on this very, very emergent level, you feel this profound connection with everything and everyone, because there's the sense of oneness and there's this huge love. But I think it needs more than just to say love. I think when I stuck with just love, I was very naive. Because there's a wisdom. I've got to stop these balloons. So it's kind of, there's a wisdom to know how to implement that, to how to love that, and how to love wisely is the hard bit. I'm not sure. I think coming into that big love is relatively easy. I've taken thousands of people around the world into it, thousands probably now, and most of them found it quite easy. But then to love wisely, that takes a lifetime. Many, 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 many of them, I suspect. So that's where it's like we are now. So what I'm saying is, I think I agree with you now. Now the universe has got this in it. It's a bit like with the poetic, or it's like now it has this in it. Go back far enough, it doesn't have any of this, because this is very, very emergent. So we don't have to imagine that this stuff exists, I don't know how, from nowhere. We can start with just one, and it will lead to love. Which is why if you go back down, when you study physics, you don't there going, oh, the love in this. You may love physics, but you're not looking at physics and iron filings moving about going, oh, there's a lot of love involved here. What you're seeing is something as a different level. It will become love. So you could say, well, the original word that Newton used for gravity was attraction. So that sense of coming together and being one, it is there right from the beginning, as well as separation. But the emotional love, that'll take a long time to come. And now it's here. So I want to make clear that I don't see God as a telos. I don't see it as we're heading towards this and we always have been. I see it much more like that's what it's got to now. And I don't think God knows what's going on. I think it knows probably better than me, because it's the way I see it is like on an analogy with the body on the biological level. So in this process of evolution, we got eventually to single cells, and then they actually merged into a super system, like you and me, trillions of them. And my hypothesis is that the same thing is happening now on the level of the psyche. That when we enter these deep awake states, we come into communion with each other in such a way that we form a super system. And that super system is what we call experience as God. And there's two things, this is, again, always a bit worried about computer analogies because they can be so crass, but, you get a lot of computers together and you plug them all together, you get the internet. And that sense of individual intelligences forming a greater intelligence. So we're individual intelligences on a very emergent level that can come into communion to form a greater intelligence. What that is, I'm as distant from that as a cell in my finger is from me. But what it's like to commune in it That I know. And that's the love you're talking about. That's this enormous, enormous love, which you end up wanting to serve. And there's one other thing that I'd like to say to you at this point, which I'd love to hear what you've got to make of, which is one of the things I love about that hypothesis is it flips around the old idea you get, especially in the East, that the aim is to, we've fallen into Maya, we're in the samsara, we need to get back to God and dissolve back into the one like a drop into the ocean, which always sounds lovely until you stop and think about it and go, oh, so my whole life and all my struggles and it was all a waste of time. I'm just going to go back to where I was in the beginning. It was all for nothing. What I love about this new image and why it's the unividual philosophy is because it says, look, the reason you're not talking to a big pile of cells like a slime mold, the reason you're talking to a human being is because all these cells are doing something different, but they're working together. And I think it's the same with the super soul, with God. I think what we bring to it is that we're different. And it's not about dissolving that individuality. You bring what you are, which is your life. So you bring your wisdom, you bring your experience to something greater. And what we're doing here is evolving that. And we can, as we mature, we can evolve that deliberately to serve this greater thing, which we can commune in. And what we're bringing to it and what people experience after death is in part, and now, it is communing as an individual within that communion of souls.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I guess I tend to deeply resonate with some of the other strains of ancient Indian philosophy, Advaita, that characterize this all as the play of God, the play of divinity, which feels much more like inclusive and affirming. It's not like Maya was a big waste of time, we just had to get back. It was like, this is all God dancing. This is all the great dance of God, you could say. And I guess what I wonder about with your beautiful philosophy is what makes you feel so sure that what you're characterizing as the beginning truly was the beginning? And what makes you feel so sure that God was not there? And what makes you feel so sure that the entire 13 billion year history of our cosmos isn't just a twinkle in God's eyeball, which is infinite and which has given rise to infinite cosmoses, infinite omniverses that are going through unimaginable spirals of evolution in every imaginable formulation?
Well, I think some of that's completely possible, Jordan. Well, all of it's possible. I don't know. I mean, I'm just working out what makes the most sense and accounts for my experience and the experience of others that I take seriously. So firstly, I don't know that that our universe was the beginning. I'm not saying there wasn't, before there was nothing. I think time seems to have emerged with space. So I think there's a non-temporal level to reality, which we study with mathematics. But that it could give rise to the whole idea in science of multiverses, many universes, infinite perhaps. We live in a very, very big universe. Why shouldn't there be as many universes as there are stars? Who knows? I think all of that's perfectly possible. I think the idea of what I called in Soul Story, the genealogical universe is worth taking seriously. I don't know, but it seems plausible to me that universes give birth to other universes and that ours isn't the first, and that some of the passivity which takes place very early on in our universe is not set up for the first time. It's repeating things that have been done before, and that it may be following patterns that have been established previously. All of that, though, just pushes the problem back and back and back. So acknowledging all of those possibilities, you're still left with, okay, so what's the general principle? And the general principle I'm suggesting is the differentiation of being into becoming. And why I prefer that to the idea of God at the beginning? Well, partly because of the reasons I've already explored. That I don't think the idea of the play is lovely. It's poetic, and I love it, and I've had it myself. The Leela, it's all the Leela. It's like, it's lovely when things are going well, but hey, I'm not going into Belson and going, it's just God's play. Hey guys, it's like, really, what makes it God's play? Exactly this fucked up suffering on this level, or the baby who's dying of cancer, or whatever it is. It's like, no, don't worry, darling. I know it's your little baby, but it's just God's play. It's like, yeah, really? I can't wait to meet this God, because I'm going to have words, because this is not play. That may be a good word for bits of it, but not for this. That's not the right word. This is horror. Horror is not play. So it doesn't work for me. This does, though.
Wouldn't you
We've
say
lost you.
all the greatest stories and theatrical plays include elements of tragedy, though?
Yeah, because they're about how we can redeem it. That's what they are, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to come to a more emergent place where we can redeem that. But we don't redeem it by making it some divine, intentional something. We redeem it by bringing love to it and solving the problems when we can. So, and then with the ontological question, it's like, how on earth is it helpful, really, to go, this universe is a mystery, but we can understand it by assuming that what exists before it is an even bigger mystery. There's some sort of supermind that just exists from nowhere and just has all these qualities, but it just exists. And then it's created this. Well, for me, that's on the same level as people who go, we're living in a simulation, and you want to go, well, maybe, but how's that helped? Because a simulation of what? Because that's what we need to understand. So it hasn't helped. So given that it seems to be frankly to me now an ugly idea, and it doesn't help ontologically, that's when I stop and go, is there an alternative? And the alternative that I'm exploring doesn't have those problems and still keeps my relationship with God better than ever. And the reason it feels so real and so emergent is because it's the most emergent level. And when I touch it, it's like, yeah, that's the most emergent level that I have access to anyway.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess I can share from personal experience that it does help me ontologically, and it's not, for me, it's not just an assumption. It's like my most profound mystical experiences of dissolving into an infinite light beyond all description. I would call it a light, a power, but words can't do justice whatsoever. It's just an infinity, beyond,
Yes.
any description. For me, the feeling of this entire cosmos is spontaneously emerging from that light as a kind of mythopoetic song, as a kind of artistry, as a kind of poetry. For me, that feels like the most redeeming, because then I can feel all of it from the very beginning as being suffused with that love and that intelligence. And for me personally, that is even more able to redeem, the worst of the tragedies. But
I completely know why you're saying that, because what you're describing is the view you would have found in every one of my books up until Soul Story. So 34 of them. It's only Soul Story and now the new podcast that I've revised all of that. And I know you're not saying this, but but the thing is, like, again, it's like, okay, if you ideate in these ways, if you have these ideas, you will tend to experience it like that. And maybe you're right. Maybe I've gone off on a tangent and I was right in the first place and I should go back to where I was. That's perfectly possible. But the reason I'm not doing that is because, having seen how I was ideating it and pushed it, this has enabled me to have that same sense of redemption without all of the philosophical problems that the other view leads to. And that feels like, I can trust that more then, because I'm not hiding from what are really quite big problems about because it doesn't fit with my experience. Because what I experience is that God is with me, going, "Oh, let's change that." Not, "Hey, it's just my play. Don't worry." It's like that's not it. Now, when you're in it, of course, that when I work most of my life, that it's a lovely feeling, and the light is incredible. Of course, I mean, just unspeakably beautiful, and but then how you then ideate it and understand it is up for grabs.
For
And
sure.
and
Yeah, and
and, so what I'm saying is I completely get why you're feeling that way, Jordan. But I'm no longer convinced that it's the way to go, and it enables us to understand how to fit science and spirituality, which it's not really about science and spirituality. It's about all of our understanding into one narrative, which answers the question you started with: what's the nature of reality? Because I guess your answer to that has to be: there's a God, whatever that means, that is emanating this and enjoying the dance of self-discovery through the process of existence. Just took a long time to get to anything being conscious. Wanted 250 million years of dinosaurs for reasons only God knows, and then finally got to this.
I guess first of all, I definitely am not saying you should go back to your previous view or you should adopt my view. The way I see it,
No,
again,
I'm
like,
not for one
yeah.
moment saying you're saying
Okay,
you're not
cool,
being
cool.
evangelical in the
Yeah,
slightest. Hopefully,
cool.
neither of us are.
Yeah, yeah. So I love seeing that there are so many ways that reality can experience itself. And I think you seem to be one of the most innovative modern sculptors of kind of new ways that reality can be with itself and see itself. And I think you're innovating a lot of maps that for many people will feel karmically appropriate and will really fit for them and will unlock things for them. And I find that really beautiful. And then I see for other beings, they'll receive some things from your maps, but they'll still find other maps or other mythologies or other lenses, other modes, even more karmically fitted and karmically appropriate. And I see that as beautiful, that there's this great diversity of which modes and which maps are most karmically auspicious for different beings. And I guess, yeah, for me, if I was going to describe my fundamental ontology, I would say that for me, God is a word I use for reality. And and
What
There's
do you mean
not
by
there's
that?
not What's that?
What do you mean? If God is a word you just use for reality, so it's the
Yeah.
same thing as reality.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what makes it God?
Well, it's utterly astounding. It's utterly astonishing. It's utterly miraculous. It's suffused with a loving intelligence. It's suffused with an astounding poetry and astounding beauty. Our loftiest superlatives don't come close, basically. And so that's why using our loftiest superlatives makes sense because it's literally infinitely beyond our loftiest superlatives. Um,
So like Spinoza. I
um,
don't.
I know of Spinoza. There's some similarity there
Okay,
because, yeah, it's although I don't know him well enough to really
sure.
say how well it maps on.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
It's not important.
and
I understand completely what you're saying.
for me it's not so important to have a really um elaborately mapped out kind of ontology that I could present because it's much more like a felt experience of reality as a living divine mystery that is shining forth from the heart of hearts or the heart of God, whatever, words can't describe it. These are the words that I would use personally. My ancestral tradition was Christianity, and I've reintegrated a lot of that mythopoetic language because it's karmically fitted and karmically appropriate. It was baked into my blood and bones. It's my native language spiritually. So that's what I use to exalt and evoke the holiest of holies. I don't know what it is. It's an astonishing divine mystery that's shining forth as you and me, and yeah, it's alive, it's trustworthy, it's intelligent, it's loving, it extends infinitely beyond our highest conception, our highest imagining. So that's generally, yeah, the way that I see things. Yeah. If anything comes up for you, feel welcome to share, or else happy to ask next question.
Yeah, no, I mean I can respond to all of that, but I think I've already done that.
Beautiful, man. Um, Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what is the meaning of this era of human history for you? And are there any larger narratives you find really useful for considering our global situation as human beings at this time?
Yeah, well, my hope is that we're evolving from a period of individualism into unividualism, or from individuals into unividuals. I think I find history absolutely fascinating, Jordan. Absolutely fascinating, because I think a lot of people don't realize how far we've come. They think this is it. It's always been like this almost, and don't realize, that we have moved the most incredible distance very, very, very quickly in this last 300 or 400 years, all of which has come through better ideas, the ability to discern better. And my hope is that continues. But that the problem that I see, well, the way I framed the Podbook, let me come in through that. The way I've framed that as what I'm doing there is to start off and go, look, there's been big shifts in our understanding. Christianity, which you mentioned, I wrote my bestseller on Christianity, and that was a big shift, massive shift. And then in the West, the next big shift was the scientific revolution, which reacted against that in many ways, but was also a product of it in many ways. What's coming next? Because every worldview thinks it's arrived, and of course it hasn't. So there will be another big paradigm shift. There just will. The question is, what will it be and when will it come? And then when it comes, because we differentiate the world in a whole new way, there'll be a new type of human being. The question is not, will that happen? It's just like, what will it be and when will it come? And what I'm suggesting in the Podbook is the last big shift saw the rejection of that mythic religion. And with it, it flipped it around from the supernatural is real and the natural is kind of unreal in various ways to, no, the natural is real, there is no supernatural. And so it ended up with Richard Dawkins going, that's just impossible. Because what exists is the material world. It's not material, we know that now, it goes down to information, but nevertheless, that's what exists. The psyche is just a byproduct of the brain, that's it. What I'm suggesting is the next big shift will be a return of spirituality, and I'm talking about in the mainstream. It obviously hasn't gone in the world, but I'm talking about in the leading edge of our understanding. I think there will be a return of spirituality, but in a form that could only exist after the scientific revolution. That's what I think will happen. And what I'm doing is trying to make a contribution towards that. And particularly after the discovery that the universe is a process of evolution, that it's not a thing, it's a process, and that it's come from the simplest to the more sophisticated and complex and more emergent. So that then we can go, oh, the spiritual level is a level of reality, it's just the most emergent level of this one process. And then we're integrating spirituality with all of our other understandings. And what that does then is it makes the new human is someone who understands that and is therefore beginning to live their life again in relationship with God, but not a mythic God anymore, but rather an emergent God, something which we can understand within this one narrative. And I think that will be the big shift. And that's what I mean by the unividual, is somebody who's then processing on this new level. Those words might be irrelevant and my philosophy might be completely wrong, but that's the direction that I think it will move in. And I certainly would like it to.
Beautiful. And what will it take for humanity to thread the eye of the needle and avoid the more dystopian and self-destructive timelines that haunt our collective dreams?
Yeah, well, any system, right the way back, it needs to do two things. It needs to stay coherent within itself, and it needs to be able to predate the world. It needs to get what it needs, one way or another. It doesn't, maybe predate's the wrong word for some of it, but but even a plant needs to have a relationship, needs to get the nutrients that it needs, and it's going to, and that's what we've seen with human beings. So human societies, this is a very simplistic way of saying it, but I think it captures it, have grown up to the ones that function best function with some form of kindness or order within to your own kind, and unkindness without to those who are not your kind. So that we've evolved to have some form of we like kindness within the group, we like order, we like law as it's come to be, but also we're capable of immense unkindness because they're not us, they're outside. And the whole of history is the story of that. That's now being challenged because we're beginning to realize, oh, we're all one kind. And that's the Unidual vision beginning to take off for me. It's like, we're realizing all humanity is one humanity. That's a big jump, massive jump. We're realizing that humanity are arising from and embedded within nature. Massive jump. And also the number of people just recently, I think over the last few decades, the number of people experiencing a fundamental oneness with the whole universe has gone through the roof. Now, it's still very small, but I mean, when I started talking about oneness 30-something years ago, no one knew what I was talking about. Everyone thought it was a bit abstract. Like, yeah, it's a bit abstract. And rather than now, where people are like, they come to me, how can I experience this oneness? Or I've experienced oneness. So all those things have happened. So what we need to do is to realize how we've evolved to get here, be conscious of that. We need to become more reflective so we can see how we ideate, because the divisions between us this is going back to the epistemology thing, not just in spirituality, but in politics, especially everywhere. If you cannot tell that your experience is being categorized according to your ideas, you think your experience is given. So I really hate that guy. Well, yeah, but why? It's because you're categorizing it in a certain way. And if you changed it, then you might hate that guy or a different guy or not hate anyone. And so we need to become more reflective, look deeper, question more, and through that process come into the one or God, feel that huge benevolence, and then try and find the wisdom to how we can work together to find it. But part of that wisdom is realizing we experience the way we categorize. We have a tendency to look for things which endorse our views, not challenge them. Once you realize that, you then look for things which challenge your views, which makes life much more interesting. There's all sorts of tricks like that we can become aware of. And we need to understand that this is not the lacking naivety. We need to understand that we have evolved to enjoy unkindness for the outside group. It's a hard thing to swallow, especially I know, but we have. We're sublimating it, I think, through fiction, through art, which is a good idea. But that enjoyment when the baddie gets his due, we enjoy it. And so we've been on a hell of a journey collectively, and if we can see ourselves, then we can make the next step. And I think we're doing pretty well, all things told. Long way to go, of course. Well, there's no limit to how far we can go. It's not like when will we get there? There's no there. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen next? Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Nobody.
Well said. Do you have time for a couple more questions before we close?
Yeah. It's such a delight to talk to you, Jordan. I hope I'm glad that you've shared some of your ideas as well, and I've been able to hear those. And
yeah, it's amazing to talk to you too. I'm really loving this. And somewhat related to what you were just speaking about, I heard you sharing with Joan Tollefson one time about an evolution in your political thinking. And I wonder, is there anything you'd like to share around how you currently see our global geopolitical situation, which seems to be in flux in some pretty big ways right now?
Yeah. Although, one of the things about being old is I have to stop myself, because this is another thing we do. Human beings have always thought it was the end days. You go through history, it's always the end days. And I've seen so many different end days now. I'm a little bit like, don't get into that, Tim, because that's what we do. And so it always feels like, well, now it's never been this bad. But, hey, I lived through the 70s. It was pretty bad. And so on and so on and so on. My father lived through the Second World War. The thought I often have is, I'm an Englishman who's in his mid-60s, and I have never fought in a war. I don't suppose there's any other generation of Englishmen who could ever say that. Ever. So, that's pretty big. That's pretty big. I've been very lucky, obviously held out for a long time to get to come to this one, because it's been fantastic. So that's the first thing, is let's not over-dramatize it. I see people saying the most outrageous things and building up the most outrageous fears unnecessarily. But I would see, there's two things. There's my own personal journey, which I don't share publicly, because I'm talking about areas I don't know much about. I came in and went, yeah, well, my theory of economics is, I don't know. I try to understand it, but, that's like me commenting on medicine or something. It's like, I may have an opinion, but it's just a personal opinion. What I want to offer in terms of being a philosopher is what we just touched on before, which is the change for me came when I started seeking out my opposite, as it were, so that, and this has become possible now. It was hard before, but we've got, wonderful things. We've got YouTube, we've got AI, it is so easy to go, here's a view I've held. Let me find an intelligent, compassionate person who thinks that's wrong. Rather than going, well, if they don't think what I think, they can't, either they're stupid or they're evil. And go, no. Actually, and so what I found is that by seeking out people who had completely opposite ideas than me, I found they were really wise. And in many cases, they helped me become wiser, I think. So that's, I think, the route through is to keep doing that. And then to really not well, they say now this phrase that's come popular, I like it, to steel man things rather than straw man them. So when you're thinking about someone else's ideas, not to present them to yourself or to anyone else in the weakest way, so you can demolish them easily, but to present them in the strongest way, so that you can give them respect. Now, you still may end up disagreeing. That's okay. But at least you're disagreeing with them, not your imagination of who they are. And a huge amount of the conflict I see is between people who are not actually disagreeing with each other. They're disagreeing with a caricature, a cartoon of the other, which they're projecting.
Well said. Yeah, I love that invitation. He who fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster, is a quote from Nietzsche that always cuts really deep for me, and invites that shadow work that you're talking about. Like, who is this monster that I've created out of the other, and where do they actually live in me, and what can I learn from them?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Mm.
I love that.
You had touched on earlier that you're a creator of retreats, and you've guided people toward the big love in a retreat context. As a fellow facilitator of retreats, I wanted to ask, when holding space for others, what approaches or attitudes do you find most important and impactful?
Right. Well, really, I would have said, other than the last 10, 15 years of my life, the experiential has been far more central to me, personally and professionally. And the books came out of that, really. So what I've been doing, I've been doing less of them because I've been concentrating on this Podbook. I'm only doing one this year, probably, in Glastonbury in October. But I love them. I'm just a big love junkie. That's the truth. It's like, really, I just want to be in that big love. And in a retreat setting, it doesn't, you can just be naive because it's completely safe. And so it's just beautiful. And what I stumbled across, whenever it was, some decades ago now, was connection. So I'd be doing all the standard things I was doing, meditation and all that. And then I got people to meditate on each other, as it were. And the most basic form that I tried out, now I've got many forms, but was gazing. And that's become, again, I've watched it become really like, oh, it's taken off now. And when I first started, people were like, oh, really? That's a bit weird, isn't it? I never get that now. I mean, I used to get it, especially with guys gazing with each other. You know, there'd be two guys like you and me gazing with each other and be like, oh, that's a bit weird. No one ever says that anymore. Just like, okay. And so the basic technique that I would say that I'm one of the powerful techniques is to get, say you and me, like we are here, and to sit us down in front of each other and going, look, just open out, just feel the basic thing holding the space is create a safe space, because every heart assured of safety opens instantly. It's just like, so create a really safe space. Just go, whoever you are, just be you. Don't try and be a spiritual version of you or anything like that, because I used to do that. I used to go to retreats and be someone else. I'd be, I like, see what I'm like. My arms go everywhere. I get overexcited. But when I went on retreats, I was very like, hello, yes, we're going to meditate. I was like, that's bullshit. So now it's just like, just be you, for heaven's sake. Your job is not to be like someone else. Your job is simply to be a more emergent you. Just evolve you. The world needs you, and all of the and I'm very lucky because I'm a philosopher and an historian and a love junkie. I get the most outrageous cross section of people. Some of whom think they're coming for lectures, and suddenly they're like, whoa, connecting with someone who's very not like them, in lots of ways. And then I'll get them to gaze. And what I'm doing with it, Jordan, is just to go, look, you see someone's face. That's beautiful, isn't it? But you're connecting with their soul, their psyche, and you can't see it. But you're still connecting with it. And if you put attention on it, it becomes stronger and stronger. And you realize, oh, I'm now communing with this other person. And that means I'm also one with them. So that you're just suddenly in this, oh, wow, what is happening? As you just pay attention to each other's soul. And you can do that with listening, you can do it with movement, with all sorts. And then what I'll do is I'll build up to, usually if it's a weekend, it'll be on a Saturday night, and we'll create an enchanted space. So it's beautiful, candles and lights and music, and it's just beautiful. And people will come in, and it's all prepared for them, and they'll come in and they'll just sit down and they're facing somebody. And they do that for 3.5 minutes or whatever it is. And it's like, wow. And then they move, and then there's somebody else. And then they move, and then there's somebody else. And then they move, and then there's somebody else. And they just do that with everyone. And by the time they've done it with everyone, they're like, the love in the room is like you're wading through it. And everyone has become so beautiful. And people are just ecstatic. And when I discovered that we could do that, and what I realized was that I didn't need to try and wake anyone up. We could do it to each other. We just do it to each other. And what I love about that is that when at the end people are going, oh, thank you, thank you. It's not like, oh, thank you, Tim. It's like, thank you, everyone. Because each person gave of themselves in that communion. And I just love that. It's just so precious.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It makes me wonder what the longest you have people eye gaze for is. And I think I also saw that you do this even on Zoom sometimes. And I wonder how that works.
Well, I've done it on the Zoom thing. I mean, in the ceremony like that, we'll do it for about 3.5 minutes with each person, depending on the number of people. And there'll be about 20. I've done it with 50, but then you haven't met everyone. I've done it with hundreds, but then you only meet a certain percentage. But, with the one we'll do in October, there'll probably be 24 of us, and you'll meet everyone, and it'll be an hour and a quarter, something like that, hour and 20 minutes. And then you're ready, because it's quite exhausting too. At the end of it, it's like, that was a big experience. And you just step into God. So what was the other question? Oh, the
Zoom.
Oh, the Zoom. Yes. I know Zoom. So when uh, COVID happened, my wife and I were due to fly out to Japan because I run retreats out in Japan, and COVID happened, couldn't go. And they said, "Oh, will you do it on Zoom?" I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, how the hell do I do this on? How do I do anything on Zoom? I haven't done anything, let alone run a 5-day retreat with a lot of people that don't speak English. This is going to be full on, and it was great. It really surprised me. So what you get with Zoom, and I do it now in my online community, the international community of Unividuals, which I chose as a name because it shortens to ICU, which is kind of sweet. And now you know what I do. So it's like, I see you. So we meet up and we'll do this. You know, we do it a bit every week, but we'll do some gazing probably once a month. And it's a small community, but it is international. So there's people all over the world, literally. And so what you lack is that, you know, like now, I can't hold your hands. At the end of this, I want to give you a big hug, and I can't give you a big hug. So there's all the things you don't get. Yeah, exactly. You can still feel it, but it's not the same. It's different. But what you do get, which is great, is there's a lady who joins us, gets up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and joins us from Australia. And I'm gazing with her. We all are. And it's like, oh my God, I feel so connected with her. Like she's with me and she's on the other side of the world. And you really get the non-spatial nature of the soul, that those connections are not spatial, clearly. And so you do get that. And so then when I'm, even with the meditation, let alone with the gazing, when I'm just sitting here in my office and everything is the same, wow, connectedness, you think, this is amazing. I'm just sat here in my little office, but I'm connected with all of these people and I can absolutely feel it. And so can they. And so I think the Zoom thing has been amazing and is the beginning. I mean, just that you and I could do this across Europe. It's just, wow. It's a whole new thing. So yeah, new spiritual practice.
That's awesome. That's amazing, man. And in case you're not aware, on Zoom, you can also hide the self view. So you hide yourself. So you only see the other person. The other person then becomes full screen. So I imagine that might be, I don't know if everyone's doing that, but that's an instruction you could give that could make it even more powerful, because then they won't see themselves. They'll just, the other person will take up the full screen.
Like the pinning?
No, you click view and hide self view in the upper right. And so I haven't been seeing myself this whole time. I've only been seeing you in front of me. And
is that new? I hadn't seen that before.
They kind of hide it in that menu. It's been there for at least a couple years, but yeah, I usually do that on Zoom to create more of a face-to-face dynamic where I'm not distracted by myself. So yeah.
Very nice. Good. Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Often on Zoom, we'll do it collectively as well. Sometimes people go into rooms and do it one-to-one, but sometimes we'll all focus on one person, which is slightly different as well.
Beautiful. So one final question for you, my friend. It's been amazing to meet you. Thank you so much. And if you had an opportunity to send one message to everyone in the world in this moment, what would that message be?
Well, I'm going to say two things. Because my first thing is, just because I'm feeling it, and it's a cheeky thing to say, I know it. I want to send a message to you first and then to the world. Because my message to you is, I really want you to come to the retreat in October because I want to sit in the big love with you. I really do. I want to sit there and look in your eyes and go, wow, yeah. Because I can just feel your connection with that love so strongly, and I resonate with it so deeply. So I'd love to actually dive into it with you. Well, it doesn't have to be here. One way or another. I hope that happens somehow. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I've said how important it is, I think, not to be naive, but now I'm going to be naive. Because when I come into that big love, that deep awake space, the intuition I get if I was to say it does sound naive. And there's a moment in Soul Story where I confess this and really go, look, this whole edifice of ideas is a way of giving intellectual support to something which just sounds childlike. So all the ideas have been shoring up this. And the way that I put in Soul Story is probably the way I put it now, which is my message. Despite everything, life is good, death is safe, and what really matters is love.
Beautiful. I love that. Life is good, death is safe. What really matters is love. Well, thank you so much. Tim, is there anything you'd like to share about where people can find more about your work?
Yeah, you can find it all on my website. As long as I've got a funny name, so as long as you spell it right, Freke, you will find me, timfreke.com. The Podbook comes out through podcast providers and with video on YouTube starting on the 1st of May. It is my life's work. I very much hope that you'll check it out. If you want to experience what we do online together, try out the ICU. We meet on a Sunday night, and you don't have to come as well. You get videos if you don't. My newsletter, you'll hear about all these wonderful conversations I have, like the one I've just had with Jordan. You can sign up on my website. And I have a retreat in Glastonbury. It'll be a beautiful, intimate experience, and you're absolutely would love to see you.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'll talk to you in a moment after the show, but for now, just to you and all our listeners, take good care and much love.